So hello and welcome to you all, both here in Brussels and to those attending online. Thank you very much for being with us. My name is James Wilmot from Forum Europe, and as I hope you're all aware by this stage, we're here this afternoon to discuss the EU's CHIPS Act for European and global businesses, for innovation, security of supply, sovereignty, and its potential as a model perhaps for future industrial policy in Europe. I'm also grateful to all the speakers and the moderators who are taking the time to be with us today, so thank you. And in terms of interaction, to the participants in the room, if you would like to make any brief comments or if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. And for those attending online, on the right-hand side of your screen, you have your chat function, and we'll be passing comments and questions to the moderators throughout the afternoon. A big thanks to the conference sponsors, Intel, Broadcom and Qualcomm, for their support of this afternoon's discussion. Just some brief practical additional details. We're not distributing printed handouts, as you might have noticed, but you should have all received an email from us earlier today with links to the agenda and other relevant materials. If you haven't had that, just let us know and we'll make sure you sent it. For those of you online, all this information will actually be on the platform. So on the left-hand side, you've got your main navigation. As I said, on the right-hand side, you've got your chat. And any problems with any of the platform, just post it in the chat and my colleagues will be responsive and come back to you as quickly as they can. The network for the Wi-Fi is the Hotel Park. I don't believe there's a password, and the hashtag is the CHIPS Act. So do get involved in the conversation there. So with that, thank you once again for being with us, and I'll now hand over to Paul, Forum Europe's chairman, who will moderate this opening session. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James. Am I on? Yep, right. Welcome to everybody as well. It's great to see you all. This is a hybrid conference, so we have a hybrid panel. I have the pleasure of having Dan Nicker with me on my right. We have Lucia, surely somewhere in Brussels, but not in this very place. Hi, Lucia. Lovely to see you. And then we have a pre-recorded message from Robert Troy later on after we've heard from our two other speakers. Let me very, very briefly set the scene as I can see it. As we all know, semiconductors are some of the most complex objects humans can make. They are integral to European and global economies, digital transformation, and are increasingly strategically crucial from a geopolitical and technological sovereignty point of view. But the supply of these chips has for a long time lacked elasticity. Gluts and shortages of supply are not uncommon, with the pandemic significantly compounding supply issues, as we all know, leading some vital European industries reliant on semiconductors to have closed their manufacturing because of a lack of components. The costs and loss of its business have run into billions, and the EU's green and digital transition is at risk of delay. The European Commission released early February its primary response to this crisis through the European CHIPS Act, aiming to double the European share of global microchip production by 2030 and reduce supply dependencies. These are delicate times, as we all know as well. However, semiconductors have become political and are also raising important questions around trade, state aid, competition rules, and global partnerships, and an important test case for Europe's ability to coordinate and react quickly to the drive for greater strategic autonomy. This afternoon's discussion, we will analyze the EU's plan to deepen its technological autonomy, particularly as it relates to semiconductors, and we will assess the European CHIPS Act, of course, and ask if it is ambitious enough, fit for purpose, to deliver the security of supply. And that key question, to what extent will the European CHIPS Act be a template for the future of industrial policy in Europe? So as I said, we have three great speakers, three senior representatives of what we call in the Brussels bubble, the institutional triangle. And we're going to kick off with a presentation complete with slides, which I'm told are fully functioning, by Lucilla Scioli, who's Director of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry at DG Connect at the European Commission. So without further ado from me, over to you, Lucia, and thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for the introduction, which is going to make my job much easier, because in fact I would like to start by telling you why Europe really needed a CHIPS Act. And of course the starting point is the crisis that Paul just mentioned, and the fact that this crisis affected a lot of important economic sectors in the European Union, as well as some sectors such as healthcare that have a very important impact on our society. And we went deeper, of course. We digged into the reasons of the shortage. And one of the main reasons is the fact that producers of chips in other parts of the world prioritize the production of chips for computers and mobile devices, because people were teleworking and they were home working and they were doing homeschooling. And therefore production of chips for certain industrial sectors was basically delayed. And this is what has impacted negatively important economies such as the European Union. Now, this obviously revealed the excess of dependency of the European Union on the production of semiconductors in other parts of the world, and in particular in Asia, and in particular in countries like Taiwan, which is itself exposed to some of the geopolitical tensions that we know today. And it is therefore very important that the European Union has a reflection and a policy, a very specific policy, on how to strengthen its capabilities, in this case to produce semiconductors. But the fact that it is not enough to be able to produce semiconductors, one also has to be able to design them, and one also has to be able to work on the next generation of semiconductors, because these are technologies that are very innovative, very R&D intensive. And one of the reasons why the ecosystem is weak in the European Union is because the cost of production and the cost of facilities to manufacture semiconductors is very high. And because these costs are very high, the facilities have been traditionally built in parts of the world where subsidies and greater subsidies were available. And therefore, the production capability in the European Union is limited. And over time, this is also translated in a kind of lack of skills in being able to actually produce advanced semiconductors. It is therefore important that the European Union takes important steps, and this is important for semiconductors, but it's also important really for the technological autonomy of the European Union, because chips are everywhere in our economy, in our society. We cannot depend excessively on imports from other parts of the world. We have to be able to master and use the technologies with the characteristics that we want. And we don't just want to have semiconductors and chips in general, but we really want them to have some characteristics such as energy efficiency. We want to deal with secure semiconductors, and we really want these semiconductors to help us in the digital and the green transition. So when we look at the market for semiconductors, the first thing we see is that the expected increase in demand is very, very important. We actually expect a doubling in the demand for semiconductors in the next, before 2030. And this increase in demand is actually coming with some challenges. First of all, the fact that there are emerging market opportunities such as artificial intelligence or edge computing, or the digital transformation of many verticals, from electrification of vehicles in automotive to the softwarization of the communication network. And all this is going to really bring an important demand in terms of semiconductors, and it's going to bring also demands for more advanced semiconductors than what we are actually able to produce today. It is also going to bring some new needs. For example, for artificial intelligence applications, it will be very important for chip makers and verticals to work together. And so it's going to bring some new business models and some new forms of collaboration between different parts of our economy. And last but not least, we are going to have a technological challenge, the challenge of miniaturization. We are already going to smaller and smaller nanometers, and you often hear 5 nanometers or 3 nanometers. But then when we go below 2 nanometers, then the technology changes. And so we are really reaching the limits, the physical limits of miniaturization. And there are important challenges ahead, therefore, to have the next generation of chips to be able also to produce through existing approaches, but also through new approaches like neuromorphic or advanced packaging. And in the European Union, we do, of course, have important capabilities. We have, first of all, what you have in the slide is a little bit the value chain of semiconductors, which is, by the way, very complex, and it is global. And you know, the European Union is strong in some of the segments of this value chain, for example, in raw materials, or it's strong in equipment manufacturing. It also has some companies that design and produce semiconductors. There are maybe in the top 10, 15 in the world, but we are not really the front runners and the leaders in the design and the production of chips. And so this is very much the area where we need to increase our efforts. We are also very good in research and development. We are home to some important research and technology organizations. And we really need to address the gaps in our value chain to be able to be more resilient to possible shortages that can place in the future and to possible disruptions of the supply chain that can take place exactly and make us suffer exactly because this value chain is global and complex. And therefore, a little bottleneck in a faraway country in Asia can really create a major disturbance in our economy. These are the reasons for why we need the CHIPS Act, and we have tried to address our needs through different documents. You will find the communication, you will find the regulation on the CHIPS Act, a recommendation for member states, a modification of the way our well-known joint undertaking in microelectronics is going to work. But all this is because we think that we have to become even stronger in what is our capabilities in research and technology leadership. We want to be able to strengthen our capacity to innovate in design and in production of chips. We want to put in place facilities that can actually produce chips on the European Union. We want to address the skills gaps because all these activities require a very talented pool, and we have these kind of shortages in the European Union as well. And last but not least, we want to be able to anticipate disruptions in the supply chain by strengthening the monitoring of the supply chain globally and work in closer collaboration with member states to be able to achieve some of these objectives. And so our CHIPS Act to achieve these objectives has been organized in 3 pillars. A first pillar, which is about introducing a new innovation program to strengthen our leadership in advanced technologies. A second pillar aiming at introducing rules that make Europe an attractive place for investment for production facilities. And in our third pillar, we look at our capability of monitoring and working with the member states and with our international partners to be able to anticipate the possible disruptions and shortages in the future. So in pillar 1, what we try to do is really to put in place a new program which comes with a budget and which is going to address our capability of bringing innovation from research to more industrial performance. This is because, as I said earlier, we are very good in research, and we have been investing about 4 billion euros during a multi-annual financial framework period of the European Union of 7 years in semiconductors with the member states. But still, our capabilities in research have not translated in strength in terms of industrial capabilities. And so we want to be able to bridge this gap. And to do that, we have proposed a program where we would like to develop some pilot lines, which should allow and should facilitate testing and experimenting by industry. We would like to build a new design infrastructure, so an infrastructure that offers instruments and tools to strengthen our design capabilities. Design, as I said earlier, is also a gap in the European Union, and we need to be able to strengthen our ecosystem from this point of view, reducing, for example, the cost of the instruments that design companies can actually access to. We want to be able to be at the forefront also for the development of quantum chips, because quantum computing is coming up, and we should be able to also develop the chips for the computers. We need to be able to multiply and reach out to the many companies that are using semiconductors or that are active in the field of semiconductors through dedicated competence centers. And last but not least, we would like to help startups and small medium enterprises by putting in place financial instruments, more equity, more venture capital, and we will do that through what we call the CHIPS Fund, which is actually new budget that we allocate and dedicated budget that we allocate through Invest EU and the European Innovation Council programs. Our second pillar looks at the security of supply. So this is looking more at facilitating investment in the European Union, in particular for production facility. But we want to see certain kinds of production facility. So we know that these production facilities need to be supported through public subsidies. And we say that public subsidies should be devoted to support facilities that are first of a kind, so that are able in the European Union to be innovative from some point of view. It can be because it produces advanced nodes, but it can also be because there are new energy efficient applications, or simply in the way the facility works, that there are better technology and greener technologies that can be used from this point of view. And so if we can recognize production facilities for being first of a kind, then of course they can be publicly subsidized, of course, and we advise the possibility to use Article 107.3c of the treaty, so to be assessed as stated directly under the treaty, so that the Commission will apply a balancing test about the positive impact of the facility with the negative impact on competition. And of course, in return, let's say, from the public subsidy, we also want to make sure that these companies will continue to invest and will continue to innovate in the future for the next generation technologies in the European Union. And then for the third pillar, we would like to be able to increase our capability of monitoring the value chain. We need more transparency to be able to anticipate moments of crisis and possible disruptions. Here we propose to work in close collaboration with member states, and we have already done to do so. And we are now in the process of mapping, for example, the semiconductor supply chain in the European Union. The idea is to be able to anticipate disruptions so that we can decide at some point, if we meet certain indicators, that we are in a moment of crisis in the European Union. And then if we can access a toolbox of innovative measures, which include the fact that we can, for example, gather information from companies in a compulsory manner. The fact that we could ask companies to prioritize the production of chips, in particular to those companies that have been receiving public subsidies. The fact that the European Commission could act as a central purchasing body for materials, for example, that are anticipated to be missing in the European Union, and therefore can help member states by leveraging its bargaining power. And last but not least, it could use the export control instrument also to be able to strengthen its security of supply in moments of crisis. So this is in essence what the CHIPS Act is. Of course, we are not working in isolation. We work in a global context with a global value chain, and this is not forgotten. And so we're working very closely with other like-minded partners, the Trade and Technology Council with the United States, for example, but also with Japan and with South Korea and with Singapore. And these are countries that we need to work with because the value chain is global, but also because by exchanging information, we can actually all together collectively anticipate and possibly avoid possible impacts and negative impacts of possible disruptions. So I thank you very much. I close my presentation here, and I thank you very much for listening to the CHIPS Act, and I hope you will have a very good discussion. Thank you.
Much, Lucia. Before you go, a very quick question from me, and maybe hopefully a brief answer from you, because time is ticking. We'll hear obviously from Dan in a second from the European Parliament perspective, but from your perspective, in terms of the member state response, what level of enthusiasm and even optimism, or as opposed to maybe skepticism, cynicism, have you detected in the Council? I ask the question very directly because industrial strategy for electronics, and people might say, well, you tried it before, what's different now? So in a nutshell, what kind of reception have you had at member state level to the new European CHIPS Act proposal?
I have to say that the member states have demonstrated enthusiasm. They all realize that there is a problem, and they have all suffered one way or the other because of the shortage in semiconductors. And so they're very pleased to see that we have proposed the CHIPS Act. Of course, we are discussing in Council the details and the nitty-gritty of the proposal, and we are not having, unanimity on all the details of the proposal, of course, but I would say that the member states have been welcoming the proposal. And as I said, we already started working together in an expert group, thanks to the recommendation on possible shortages. And we are looking at the crisis like Ukraine and other problems that have emerged since. This is important, and it's very important to have a mechanism at our disposal to coordinate our action and to be able to face these kind of challenges.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Lucia. I know you're very busy, you've got other meetings to attend. We'll let you go, and thank you very much for your presentation. Moving swiftly on, it gives me a very great pleasure to introduce Dan Nica, who of course is the key person in the European Parliament on this dossier, the main rapporteur for the ITRE committee. You've been very patient listening and waiting, so now's your moment. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you so much, Paul. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much to Forum Europe organizing this debate. Although it's at the very early stages, we have only the Commission proposal on the table. And I like to say a few words, but without prejudice to the final report. For those of you who are not familiar with the work, now the Commission, they did their part of the job. They have a proposal. Now it's the European Parliament who is entitled and will do so, will modify the proposal accordingly. And then with that document, once it's approved, we go to the Council for the final negotiations, because only the Parliament and the Council, they have legislative powers. So that's why me as a rapporteur, I'm in a constant process of meeting different stakeholders, as we did it yesterday. Some of you, they are in this very room. And will continue to do so, because it is rarely happened that the proposal of the Commission, it is adopted as such, for obvious reasons, because they have not enough time to meet all the people. Maybe they didn't pay enough attention to all the details. That's why the process. It's a very complex one. So please allow me to share with you some of my initial thoughts. Why we have this act, and which is welcome by almost by everybody. I say almost because there are quite a few voices who are against this act, international actors included. Because the COVID-19 and the Ukraine war, they brought to us a new kind of situation. So I'm also a member of the COVID contact group. We discovered that for one of the vaccines on the yearly 2000 at the very beginning of the pandemic, one component was missing. And that because one country decided to block the export of that component, which was only one out of the 264 components, part of one of the most famous vaccines. So that led to the situation in the European Union. You remember here in Belgium and elsewhere, long waiting lines, low queues, because the people, they just couldn't get access to that vaccine. So what we did after that, immediately we decided to address all the bottlenecks on the production of the COVID vaccines in order to be ready to prepare, to manufacture and to produce here inside the European Union. And that worked very well. Now is the war in Ukraine. Among other things, what we discovered that we need neon to manufacture the chips. And guess what? We don't have capacities ready to produce neon, although it's not state-of-the-art, it's not like breakthrough technology. You can do it basically in a steel plant, but we don't have the neon. And we don't know if the capacities in Ukraine, they are working, they will be ready to produce, they have to be dismantled and move elsewhere. So they are the very reasons why basically we welcome the CHIPS Act. We have to be sure that we are be able to produce at the minimum level, but to keep floating the industry in the European Union. So we cannot be at the mercy of the good luck or bad luck, and to discover when it's too late that we don't have enough chips for our cars, or we don't have enough chips for artificial intelligence applications or for our consumer goods, because then it's too late. And then the price to be paid is much, much higher. Although I have some concerns, because we have to be better prepared in when we are starting to do something like, which was an unprecedented scale in a way. I'm not talking about money here, because I was still the rapporteur of Horizon Europe, and there the amount of money was close to 100 billion euros. Here I'm talking about much less, but with much more difficulties ahead of all of us, because the main manufacturers that are in Asia, we have to help and to establish some manufacturing capacities here inside the European Union. What kind of capacities? To what range of nodes? It will be below 20 nanometers. We'll go down to 2 nanometers. We'll focus on very specialized and with a strategy for 2030 and beyond, or we'll somehow stay and say, let's accommodate the demand, and the biggest demand, as I don't know, the Commission managed to show you some figures. It's in automotive industry, health industry came the second, and of course some consumers good, but not much. There are some critics about the budget, and we'll pay a close attention to the budget, because at some point of time we have to say a little bit more about the differences between us and what is the US, what is South Korea, and what is China doing in a very same area. I'm not saying that we have to be in the competition on who is giving more. I think the competition is who is smarter, and we can elaborate on that. On the competencies and the skills, yes. Here is not about the money. It is about be ready and to be ready to prepare the right persons to work in an industry which is not something which you can find around the corner, across the street. You have to prepare. You have to use the universities, and we have also very good companies here who are ready and should be able to participate in this training process, because otherwise we will just say we don't have enough or enough well-prepared and trained people to work on this new investment or new extended investment. And this one also, it will be part of the legal file. How we can retain the talents in Europe? It's about money, always. And in Horizon Europe, we managed to better address exactly the issue of the brain drain on the for the researchers in the European Union. And how we did that? We increased the possibilities for the researchers to be better paid and to be better recognized for their skills and their work. I think the same is true for this industry. The key points, they are: number one, budget. Second, the first and better EU commercial exploitation. The increase, the need to increase the synergies with the existing EU programs and various EU funding instruments, and how we can make the EU much more attractive for the investments. These are only a few of my thoughts, and I would like to take this opportunity to share with you these initial thoughts, because fortunately I'm not allowed to say too much, because that should be a presentation, an exchange of views without prejudice to the document which
Please. Thank you, Dan. You did manage to say quite a lot, even though you say you cannot say too much at this early stage. And you did say at the very beginning, it is rare, but you did say at the beginning, it is very rare the original proposal is adopted as such. So we can, I think it's a heavy hint that we can expect quite a few changes proposed by the European Parliament and your good self to the Commissioner's proposal. All the concerns you outlined, initial concerns, and I said I'm sure there may be more as more presentations and more testimony and interventions are put to you as rapporteur. But on budget, as you know, and it's maybe an article of faith, the European Parliament has quite a reputation for always asking for more, and especially when it comes to money. And how, if you were to put a figure on what you think the European Parliament should propose as a adequate budget for the CHIPS Act compared to what the Commissioners propose, what would that figure be?
And that will be the news of the day. Sorry. So unfortunately, I cannot say. I cannot give you a number, because that will be the kind of prejudice to our work. But what I know for sure is that we are not going to keep the existing proposal in terms of money, both fresh money, new fresh money, and the possible conditions for the new investments to create a better perspective and to be sure that we will have a kind of attractiveness which will lead to a clear appetite for the private investment also in the area. And number two, there are also some programs. I have to give you just an example because it's a public, they're public data. National Recovery and Resilience Funds. Most of the countries, they have money there, especially exactly for the chips. So to assist, to build and to provide financial assistance for those investing and acting on the chips industry. How much? I don't know, to give you examples, Italy, it's something like billion, Romania 500 million. So if you put all this money together and to be sure that this will be part of coherent strategy, I think that will be also a plus. And there's the third one, package, which unfortunately cannot be disclosed because that will be prejudicial.
Okay. A final question. I know you have to disappear and catch an aeroplane. In terms of timing, obviously you're at the early stages of your rapporteurship and you have to consult widely your colleagues, but also the outside world, other stakeholders. But I presume you don't want to get stuck in a lengthy and unproductive discussion, negotiation with the Commission and the Council. So from your point of view, what is an ideal timing? When would you hope and expect that the final proposal, in whatever shape or form it takes, to be finally approved by all the institutions?
So, although the official timetable cannot be announced as such because we have to follow some internal rules, my best expectation is that we'll be able to produce the final report late this year, beginning of next year, which is a kind of fast-track procedure, if you want. I want to give you the example of the latest fast-track procedure we had. It was on the next Nord Stream 2. And there it was like only 1 month or 2 months shorter the timetable than the CHIPS Act. So we want to move fast because I think it's an urgent need. We don't know what will happen next, where, and the sooner we start, the better it will be for all of us.
Okay. Well, we'll let you go, Dad. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And our final speaker in this keynote session is Robert Troy, who's recorded a message for us. Robert, as you know, is the Minister of State for Trade Promotion, Digital and Company Regulation of the Republic of Ireland. And he's given this, pre-recorded this intervention for us. So when the button is pressed, we'll listen to Robert.
I would like to thank Forum Europe for inviting me to participate in today's timely event. I apologise I cannot attend in person. However, I look forward to learning from the discussions of the panel on this important topic. The semiconductor industry is one of significance to Ireland. Ireland has played a central role in the European semiconductor landscape for over 35 years, and today we have built an extensive industry in this sector, comprising of development landscape, which includes Tyndall National Institute, a key player in the European semiconductor research and ICT ecosystem. Ireland welcomes the ambitions of the EU CHIPS Act to strengthen European resilience to supply chain disruptions and to increase European capacity in semiconductor research, design and production. We're all very much aware of the semiconductor shortage the European Union is currently facing, particularly as the impacts of COVID-19 highlighted some of the EU's vulnerabilities in terms of supply chain security and in its capacity to produce a sufficient level of semiconductor chips. I think today's discussion on this, as well as on skills and talent, and on the necessity for global partnerships, will enable important discussions on elements which will be vital to the success of the EU CHIPS Act. I would like to now make a few brief contributions to each of these three topics being discussed today. Firstly, in relation to Europe's capacity to design and manufacture semiconductor chips, we're all acutely aware of the importance of these chips to Europe's economy and society. They enable the way we live our lives, not only by enabling many forms of transportation and communication, but also enabling critical work in sectors such as healthcare and defence. Chips are also vital to both the digital and green transition. The need for Europe to produce a sufficient supply of semiconductors has become strikingly clear during the recent shortage. We're all aware, as a result of the shortage, the production of cars in some EU member states decreased by 1/3 in 2021. And according to MedTech Europe, medical technology manufacturers, including both large companies and SMEs, reported delays in delivery times of up to 18 months. This is compared to delivery times of 5 to 8 months before the crisis. The European Union has recognized the need for Europe to bolster its position in the semiconductor supply chain and in doing so has announced the goal of increasing Europe's global chip market share to 20% by 2030. This is an ambitious target, particularly as market analysis has found that the global semiconductor industry will itself grow significantly by 2030. This global growth of the industry makes Europe's jump to reach 20%. However, it is not to say Europe cannot make the leap, and Ireland supports the objectives of the EU Chips Act, which will enable Europe to achieve this goal. The EU Chips Act has set out a number of actions to support and facilitate the growth of the European market into a leading and innovative semiconductor chip designer and manufacturer. However, as we define these initiatives, it is important that while the Union adapts to foster a strong European semiconductor industry, it also remains open and attractive to foreign direct investment in this sector. It is clear that Europe needs to support an increase in manufacturing capacity of semiconductors and microprocessors to support supply resilience and to ensure that Europe can compete with Asia and the US. However, support should not differentiate between European and non-European companies operating or headquartered within the EU. We must be careful not to exclude others to our detriment. Furthermore, as member states negotiate and implement actions under the CHIPS Act, it is imperative that input from across the entire industry supply chain, from designers to manufacturers to users, are heard and considered in order to best achieve a security of supply. Today's discussion with industry, national, European Commission representatives, all of whom are on the panel, is an opportunity to discuss important elements of the proposal with a broad base of stakeholders, and I look forward to hearing from the discussion on this element. The panel speakers will also discuss research and development alongside skills and talent, elements which are imperative to boosting Europe's technology sovereignty. Indeed, Ireland's semiconductor R&D landscape is well developed, and the range and quality of semiconductor R&D in Ireland is exceptionally strong. Over 450 million was spent in-house R&D in 2019. Significant investments are supported by a network of national R&D centres which specialise in areas such as nanoelectronics and nanoscale materials, photonics, wafer fabrication, sensor technologies, radio frequency technologies, digital analog, and mixed signal circuit design. As mentioned earlier, Ireland is home to Tyndall National Institute, a leading research centre with world-leading expertise in ICT, micro and nano systems, and photonics. This strong R&D ecosystem has supported Ireland's semiconductor industry. The EU Chips Act presents an opportunity to further develop and strengthen the EU's innovative capacity, and I look forward to seeing Ireland's R&D ecosystem collaborate with European counterparts and play a key role in this regard. A critical factor to further developing and strengthening the EU's innovative capacity where they can develop long-term rewarding careers within the European semiconductor R&D sector and in the semiconductor industry. I look forward to learning from today's discussion how Europe and its member states, through the CHIPS Act, can boost Europe's semiconductor R&D ecosystem and attract and retain the necessary skills and talent in Europe. Finally, today's discussion will consider the CHIPS Act within a global context. Due to the complex and global nature of semiconductor supply chains, Europe's supply of semiconductor chips cannot be secured without considering global partnership and challenges. Within this context, and to address the challenges presented by the global nature of semiconductor supply chains, Europe must be adaptable and build on our strengths, such as the single market and our many trade links. We must also look to new markets to diversify sources of supply. In strengthening the European semiconductor industry and Europe's technological supply chain, We must maintain openness to our partners who are trusted and who share the same set of values. The EU and US Trade and Technology Council is a good example of this. This forum offers an opportunity to develop strong supply chains and to create stronger bonds within the global industry. Through creating a strong and diverse supply chain and creating partnerships with the US and other trusted partners, Europe will have greater opportunities to mitigate risk and vulnerabilities. I would like to thank Forum Europe for asking me to participate in today's conference. Engagement among stakeholders, such as that which will take place today, is invaluable as we negotiate proposed regulations such as the CHIPS Act. I look forward to learning from today's discussions about the key aspects of the CHIPS Act, including Europe's semiconductor production capacity, Europe's research development, skills and talent capabilities, and needs within this sector, and the requirement for global partnerships. As a European member state with a strong semiconductor design and fabrication history, Ireland looks forward to continued engagement on the CHIPS Act, both with stakeholders and our counterparts within the EU. Thank you, and the best of luck with today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Minister. I know you can't hear me, but we're very grateful that you were able to record that message for us.